InvestorIdeas.com podcast.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com podcasts. In today's podcast, we're going to be looking at a few public company announcements from HITI Incorporated, trading on the TSXV Venture and the Nasdaq as HITI, Forefront Ventures Corporation, trading on the CSE as FFNT and the OTCQX as FFNTF, Ascend Wellness Holdings Incorporated, trading on the CSE as AAWH.U and the OTCQX as AAWH, KHRN Life Sciences Corporation, trading on the TSXV Venture as KHRN and the OTCQX as KHRNF, as well as DELC Holdings Corporation Incorporated, trading on the CSE as DELC and the OTCQB as DELCF. So first today, starting with Forefront Ventures Corporation, a vertically integrated multi-state cannabis operator, who announced that it signed a definitive agreement on October 6th to acquire New England Cannabis Corporation, a best-in-class cannabis cultivator with state-of-the-art facilities based in Holliston, Massachusetts. Now, upon closing the transaction, it's expected to be significantly accretive to the company's EBITDA expectations for 2022 and will immediately scale Forefront's presence as a dominant wholesaler and producer in the state. Now, Massachusetts' competitive adult use cannabis market is rapidly growing, and Forefront has already introduced its full suite of popular brands in the state, which have achieved wide-scale consumer support. Now, the company expects the acquisition of NECC to significantly expand Forefront's strategic position and enable broader market penetration of Forefront's diverse range of low-cost, high-quality products and brands. The acquisition of New England Cannabis reinforces our core thesis of bringing scale, low-cost production, and operational depth to attractive nascent adult use cannabis markets, said Leo Gottenmaker, the Chief Executive Officer of Forefront. Now, the addition of NECC's impressive operations will increase our canopy kitchen capacity and add to our extraction capabilities overnight, greatly bolstering our position in the Massachusetts market to become a leading wholesaler of our full suite of products and brands. This acquisition firmly anchors our foothold in the Northeast, and NECC's state-of-the-art facility will help to drive our growth in the years ahead as we execute on our goal of achieving dominant market share in every geography we operate. And I look forward to working with NECC's seasoned team of leveraging their extensive operational experience as we continue to scale. So, Forefront Ventures, acquisition of New England Cannabis Corporation, that's definitely going to give them some advantages in the Massachusetts market. If you've been paying attention to different states, obviously going on with different cannabis markets right now, Massachusetts is definitely one that's getting a lot of interest. The main reason is the limited license sort of capacity of the state. Again, this is something that I think the U.S. has created a great set of models when you're looking at how cannabis regulations can be implemented. There's a lot of options when you're looking at the state-by-state differences. And because of this, you've also seen a huge advancement in that the states who have come on board later, for instance, Massachusetts, have been able to benefit from sort of the learned failures of other states and have been able to implement a strategy that's a little bit more conducive to local businesses, to keeping things at a sort of manageable scale, and also avoiding some of the pitfalls that other states have had by giving away too many licenses in certain areas, or having too much production, or having too much of one thing or not enough of the other. And it seems like Massachusetts is doing quite well in having a very sort of limited capacity and nice, calm scalability. And again, for companies like Forefront Ventures now, there's definitely a lot of benefits to being in that marketplace at the moment, and especially now with this ability that New England Cannabis Corporation is going to give Forefront Ventures, having access to that lower cost market and also being able to increase their scalability and be a more dominant wholesaler. And that tends to be what you're seeing from a lot of these multi-state operators or sort of larger producers in the U.S. is when they are entering into these states, they're looking for more of just a wholesale option. And not looking to also set up their own vertically integrated sort of retail footprint, as well as there have been other retail brands now that are starting to branch out. You're starting to see that the industry, it does seem, is sort of separating into segments now, where you are seeing companies specifically devoted to cultivation and wholesaling of product, as well as product development. You are seeing companies that are specific to extraction or next generation product development, and then you are seeing retail brands start to actually be consistent and expand outside of their states. Speaking of more Massachusetts news, Ascend Wellness Holdings, which is a multi-state vertically integrated cannabis operator, as well as Eddie Parker, a luxury fashion brand known for its vintage-inspired clutches and handbags, announced the debut of Flower by Eddie Parker pre-rolls in Massachusetts. So in May, AAWH and Eddie Parker announced an exclusive wholesaling licensing agreement to bring Flower by Eddie Parker products to emerging adult use markets in Massachusetts and Illinois. And the covered West Coast brand first expanded beyond California earlier in March by launching sales in Colorado. Now, Flower by Eddie is now available in AWH's flagship Boston location, and by early November, patients and consumers in Illinois will also be able to purchase Flower by Eddie Parker pre-rolls at all 8 of AWH's retail locations. Eddie Parker's brand is known for its elegant aesthetic and devotion to delivering top-notch cannabis products and accessories, said AWH founder and CEO Abner Curtin. Now, we believe Eddie Parker will elevate and expand the selection at AWH stores, enticing new customers and delighting returning ones. Bringing this exceptional West Coast brand out east is part of the ongoing strategy of developing deeper relationships with customers in our existing markets, and we're excited to bring Eddie Parker's products to the increasingly sophisticated audience. In addition to debuting its pre-rolls in Massachusetts and Illinois, Eddie Parker will also offer a curated assortment of the brand's vibrant and artisanal cannabis accessories wherever their products are sold, and plan to launch a number of brand activations at AWH stores over the next month. So, Ascend Wellness partnering with Eddie Parker to launch some pre-rolls in Massachusetts as well as in Illinois. Seen a lot of this as well, where brands coming from more established markets in California, Colorado, now Nevada as well, is also being a market that's doing quite well as far as brand recognition, are starting to move out east or up north into Canada. And in general, those brands have been quite well received if they've been moving east as well as moving north. So I do think that strategy will continue to play out if you're paying attention to what is successful in California and Colorado and Nevada at the moment, and seeing which states those product brands, for instance, aren't in now. It's a very likely bet that over the next few months they're going to be trying to look at expansion into those markets, whether again that is moving into the Canadian market. Only a few companies have done that at the moment. There does seem to be more interest in, again, Massachusetts, Illinois, some of these East Coast states that are starting to open up and also have, again, a large population density, but also limited licenses. So that's pretty attractive to most businesses to enter into those markets, and again, especially with established brands from other well-established markets. I do think that in general, though, I don't know how well the sort of cross-business branding is actually working within the cannabis industry. We've seen stuff from different motorcycle brands. You've seen stuff from different athletic brands. And all of these have been not poorly received, but in general, I also don't think that it's something that people are actively looking for or that actively impacts their decision-making when it comes to the product purchases that they're doing. I think that a lot of the time, it is the bud tender's recommendations, and it is also, again, the person's understanding of the cannabis industry, the person's understanding of which cannabis products have been best suited for them in the past, as well as their confidence buying in stores. Whereas, again, I know that these brands are intended to be well received, and I'm sure that some people enjoy that sort of after the purchase aspect, but I don't think a lot of people are going into any stores specifically looking for these Eddie Parker pre-rolls. I think it would more just be, oh, I've had this product before, probably identifying it by either the strain or the name for it, for instance, Early Bird or Happiest Hour or Nightcap. I'm sure that those do get bought, and I'm sure that if they've had them once and they had a good experience, they would buy them again. But again, I don't know how much traction actually any of these sort of cross-business promotional branding opportunities have created in this industry that have actually impacted consumer decisions, as in they were going to buy some other pre-rolls, but then they saw, oh, I want to try the Eddie Parker pre-rolls, etc. Again, it has been a strategy that's been employed massively, but I don't know how effective it actually is when you're looking at some of the data sets from those retail stores. Looking next at KHRN Life Sciences Corporation, who announced that the company presented results for its first research study, including 1,400 patients for Chiron's own Zerenia clinics at the 29th International Pain Conference in Barranquilla, Colombia, organized by ACED, the Colombian chapter of the International Association of the Study of Pain. Now, the study, entitled Prescription Patterns and Clinical Outcomes in a Cohort of Patients Receiving Progressive Therapy with Cannabinoids for Medical Use in Colombia, is a longitudinal retrospective cohort study including the 1,400 patients receiving treatment with medical cannabis at KHRN clinics in Colombia, Zarina, and Ilans. Now, the scope of the research was to capture patient-reported outcome measures and patient-reported experience measures of general efficacy, adherence, and side effects of oral formulations ranging in cannabinoid content from the treatment of different health conditions with a diverse patient base of over a 12-month period. So some of the demographic results reported: most patients were female with an average age of 59.3 years old, which is a strong contrast with the results arising from the Project T21, the UK's first medical cannabis registry KHRN Life Sciences has been supporting since its foundation in 2019. And patients in the study were mainly diagnosed with chronic non-cancer pain, followed by nausea and vomiting, insomnia, anxiety, spasticity, and depression, among others. And up to 68% of patients had their medical cannabis prescription costs covered by the Social Security in Colombia. And the study results show a patient-reported positive clinic response in more than 80% of the participants, with only minor side effects associated to the treatment. Scientific research and data are key to convincing doctors and policymakers all over the world about the benefits of medical cannabis to treat conditions that are prevalent in every society and market we are targeting. And after 1 year of compiling information and having gone through a very detailed approval process, we are very proud to share the results from this first-of-a-kind clinical study in Latin America with such a significant patient base. Now, this is just the beginning of our ongoing research program, and we are looking forward to sharing the outcomes of this first cohort study with the international medical audience through peer-reviewed, specialized publications so doctors all over the world can continue to drive prescription growth safely and responsibly, commented Alvaro Torres, Chief Executive Officer and Director of the company. So KHRN Life Sciences, as they mentioned in there, has done other studies before. The one they've done in the UK, the T21 project, has been very extensive as well, and they have had other studies in the past that have also been quite extensive. They have a large group of patients to work with, having all their different Zarina clinics operating in, again, parts of Colombia as well as other parts of Latin America. They also have, again, their sort of partnership clinic access in the UK, and I do think that when you're, again, looking at the long-term game here of medical cannabis, especially on an international scale, this strategy might pan out very well for KHRN Life Sciences, and that they're going to be able to get into almost any market quite easily. They're going to be able to work with doctors and pharmacists and prescription givers almost immediately and have a lot of data sets to offer them right out of the gate. And they've worked with their product and their clinicians for a long time. They've worked very hand in hand with the medical community, and as well, again, with even some pharmaceutical communities and pharmacists, in ensuring that the people that are prescribing their products or are offering their products to patients really understand what they're talking about and are really measuring what's going on with the patients, so that way, again, they can use that data to further spread into other markets and also to help support the industry as a whole. I do think that, again, when you're looking at a lot of parts of this industry, there's a lot of recreational focus at the moment. There's a lot of focus on next generation products. There's still tons of hype and talk about beverages. When that's going to actually materialize into something real, obviously, is very debatable. But I do think that one thing that does get unfortunately pushed aside by all the other successes of this industry is the medical community. Again, I've mentioned many times my distaste for how often politicians or regulators, or again, people from the mainstream medical community who have not sort of really looked into cannabis research that extensively, often quote constantly that we're waiting for more data, we're waiting for more research, even though, again, there is thousands of different data sets that can go on with, including some as large as, again, this KHRN Life Sciences study, 1,400 patients, some even larger. And there's been really no end to these data sets as more and more companies enter the space, yet still people are demanding more data. I don't think that there will ever be a moment when there will be enough data for everyone to just be completely satisfied, especially as cannabis is plant medicine. So it's always going to be somewhat inconsistent when compared to the more pharmaceutical grade medicine that is out there. And even still, if you're actually paying attention to pharmaceutical grade medicine, it is wildly inconsistent, even more so than cannabis. But a lot of those data sets get manipulated. There's more lobbying. There's more endorsement of those products. So cannabis gets sort of the bum leg. And I do think that, again, there's probably never going to be a data set that comes forward that just convinces everyone. But I do think as you have more data sets like this from companies like KHRN Life Sciences, it's going to make at least medical cannabis regulations, as well as the onboarding of medical cannabis programs, much easier for any parts of the world that are skeptical about this. And they will probably work with companies like a KHRN Life Sciences, who has all of their certifications, who has tons of data sets from their clinics, who has a lot of sort of backing to all of their sort of sales pitches to actually get into these medical markets. I think that's going to give them an easier access point than a lot of their, for instance, Canadian or US-based counterparts, or parts from other medical producers who are looking at the international industry. I think they might have a bit more of a struggle than a KHRN Life Sciences if they haven't taken similar approaches. Next, looking at DELC Holdings Incorporated, who announced that DELC Labs has applied for a Health Canada 56 research exemption that would allow for the scientists to perform research and tests on a host of compounds outside of psychedelic mushrooms, including MDMA and LSD. And the lab currently holds a 56 research exemption for chemistry analysis on psilocybin mushrooms. Additionally, the lab also applied for a dealer's license and intends to eventually commercialize its psilocybin research and associated intellectual property for medical and research purposes. And some of the work would include researching extraction of pharmaceutically relevant compounds from psychedelic mushrooms and turning those extracts into medical products. And DELC Labs will also synthesize non-naturally occurring compounds as part of the ongoing MedChem pipeline. DELC Labs. So Matt Stang, co-founder and CEO of DELC Corp, commented, never before has a lab been authorized to test psychedelic compounds such as MDMA and LSD with the opportunity to create new medicines for the millions suffering from debilitating conditions like depression, anxiety, PTSD, and Parkinson's disease. DELC Labs is leading the way in psychedelic compound testing and ensuring the safety and efficacy of treatments produced using them, while also actively researching potential new medicines for the market. DELC Holdings are now moving somewhat away from just researching with psychedelic mushrooms and now looking to start researching on MDMA and LSD based off their business model and how they seem to be, again, focusing more on a sort of, let's say, pharmaceutical grade or pharmaceutical style product in the end, and that they're, again, looking at extracting specific compounds from psychedelic mushrooms, which, again, much research. If you're looking at Johns Hopkins, if you're looking at MAPS, if you're looking at companies who have spent decades focusing on psychedelic mushroom research and have, again, a lot of data sets to support what the hell they're talking about, a lot of those groups have already, again, reported that many of the studies conclude the same thing that cannabis research has also concluded, which is there is an entourage effect. These compounds work in tandem together to remove a singular compound and give you that in an extracted form, especially if it's not coming from the naturally occurring plant compound or mushroom compound, is much less effective, and also there are side effects with those types of interactions, whereas there is less side effects and there is more efficacy from a naturally occurring compound, which is, again, working with all of those molecules working in tandem together, the entourage effect. So similar to how completely pure isolated THC is less effective than if you were to take some sort of extract that includes other minor cannabinoids with high THC levels, the same thing is going to be true for most of the psychedelics that are coming out from, again, this is specific to psilocybin. If you're looking at things like LSD is exactly lab made. There is LSA, there is the naturally occurring version of LSD, which is going to be a little less potent and a little less speedy than LSD would be, and LSA you can just break down from morning glory seeds, or there's Hawaiian rose seeds, so there are other alternatives. There's a naturally occurring version of LSD, but pretty much that's always been a lab game. And same with MDMA. So those would be drugs that, again, they could work with in a much more chemistry and pharmaceutical, conducive setting. And they could produce products that are going to be much more consistent and much more dose specific. Whereas, yes, with psilocybin, similar to with cannabis, there are going to be lots of variations from person to person based off of how the plant itself was cultivated or how the mushrooms were grown, the potency level of the individual product. and then as well how that affects the person on an individual level, as again we do have unfortunately our own unique systems for dealing with these compounds, and they do break them down at different rates. People's metabolism, people's diets actually massively impact the efficacy of psychedelics. A lot of people do not consider this. This is something that most therapeutic sort of retreats for psilocybin and stuff would deal with almost immediately, is giving you specific dietary supplements or certain dietary foods to purge out any of the toxins in your system, and then also to keep you on a almost as empty or clean of a stomach as possible for when you first ingest your psilocybin or whatever the psychedelic of choice is going to be. So I do think that in general this will probably be a smarter move for DELC if they are going to be going more to that pill pop route, to focus on MDMA and LSD. Again, you're looking at MAPS. There's a massive study and a massive program that they're about to launch with an MDMA study that's going to be pretty groundbreaking. That MDMA has a lot of studies as well that are supporting for PTSD, and especially for what I think is going to be a bigger game changer, which could be for couples therapy. Again, that's one of the things that the MAP study is looking at. So I would think that it would be an easier route for them to focus again on MDMA and LSD. Again, they can control the dosage much more consistently. They're going to have much more consistent results. And as well, it's kind of an easier format for consumption than dealing with psilocybin mushrooms. Again, you could do full spectrum extracts from psilocybin mushrooms that could be made in a much easier to consume format, but even teas or IV drips or anything like that aren't as easy as the simple pill form that MDMA and LSD can become in. So I do think that you'll probably see some companies like DELC as well in the psychedelic space. I do think there will be a separation similar to what you're seeing in cannabis, where some companies are going to focus more on having the pharmaceutical grade products. Some companies are going to focus more on having the much more holistic style products that are the naturally occurring ones. And I think both business models will be equally successful, and one doesn't actually hinder or affect the success of the other, as there are very much two different consumer sets that are looking for these types of products. Many people are only trusting very pharmaceutical looking products, things that can come from a pharmacist or a doctor directly. They come in certain white bottles, they have certain descriptions and instructions on them, and some people prefer a much more, again, naturopathic approach. Lastly today, looking at HITI Incorporated, who announced that it's taking another step towards solidifying itself as a major player with the global e-commerce marketplace for hemp-derived CBD products by entering into a definitive agreement with HITI will acquire 80% of Enigma Limited, operating as Blessed CBD, for £9.06 million, and will have a 3-year option to acquire the remaining 20%. I'm very pleased to announce the addition of Blessed CBD, the UK's top CBD brand, as designated by several prominent publications, into the HITI family. We continue to increase our online prowess by adding asset-light businesses to our growing global e-commerce portfolio. Blessed is a fully direct-to-consumer platform that generates industry-leading gross margins as well as EBITDA margins that will continue to add to our considered margin profile, said Raj Grover, President and Chief Executive Officer of HITI. And the acquisition marks our entry into the highly lucrative and rapidly growing UK CBD space, which we expect to serve as our launching pad for HITI to further penetrate the EU marketplace for hemp-derived CBD products, while also taking advantage of cross-selling opportunities related to our in-house product lines. And I've been very impressed with the amazing business that has been able to build with their 2 years, and look forward to welcoming him and the rest of the Blessed team into our company, added Mr. Grover. So Blessed CBD now going to be part of HITI. I do think, again, when you're looking at how companies are entering into the EU marketplaces or into just other cannabis spaces in general, a lot of things are very beneficial when you're focusing on the CBD side. And I do think that whether it's companies entering into the US, there's many Canadian companies who have bought up or partnered with CBD companies over the last couple of months as sort of a launching point for them to enter into the US cannabis market once federal regulations do change, if they change. And the same now is also being said. There's been a few other companies who have taken HITI's approach of entering into the UK or into other EU marketplaces by just focusing on an online CBD company. And again, online CBD sales aren't going to be going down anytime soon as CBD becomes more and more normalized and separated from cannabis in many people's minds. sales are just going to continue to go up. And again, people are now quite comfortable buying CBD products online, and most consumers now have at least more of an understanding of what they should be looking for, which keywords, which sort of product categories are going to give them what they want, and understanding the difference between, hemp-derived CBD and CBD isolate, etc. So I do think that this will be a nice win for High Tide, and will probably lead to some other movements in EU marketplaces in a similar fashion, either through spreading Blessed CBD into other EU marketplaces, or again doing similar acquisitions of other competitors within the space. That's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.